thanks for your presentation, which confirmed that Italy is always a bridge between different worlds in any way. Okay, we have very few minutes for question and answer because we already run out of time. So, Professor Piga, please.
I wanted to ask Francesco what kind of governance does he imagine to be optimal for screening, whether procurers should play a role, whether it's only the job of the antitrust authority, whether antitrust and anti-corruption should work together on this issue, if he has any idea if there is an optimal governance for screening. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question to Mihaly Fazekas on the quality of the data, which I definitely agree with you, because Francesco showed a picture, a graph on frozen purge as an item where collusion took place. Do you think that such a detail could ever be obtained with collected data?
Thank you. A question to Mr. Fazekas as well. You mentioned that a lot of European countries do not publish certain type of information, either on their platforms or the designated places. That brings up the thought that a lot of NGOs have in terms of transparency, that switching to electronic means switching to automation as an answer to many things. For instance, the IDs of the companies. If the public procurement platforms would be tied to the public registries and automatically pulling out the information, of course, if it's open data information to the system, would probably solve a lot of problems, and it could have been the same on many other points that we see in public procurement. And what is your take on that, and where do you think that Europe stands in this sense? And the second question is about the data that you're going to have on Digwist. So as I understood, you're either authorized to get the information from the platforms, or you're scraping the information. So if you're scraping the information, have you considered some chances of information being lost? Maybe because in Georgia we also have an organization that scrapes information from the public procurement agency's website. But the thing is that a part of the information, I would say 10%, 15% is lost or unreadable because within the scraping you cannot recognize afterwards. So then the authority says that this information is not credible because it's missing some information and it's not official. So some information on that. Thank you.
Can your test be also considered a test about collusion? Because except the first indicator, which is composed by two parameters, in that case, one is definitely about corruption, but the other one could be also interpreted as a parameters indicating something about collusion. But the other two indicators could also be considered something about collusion. So, in a way, your analysis could be also considered an analysis about something which could be due to collusion and corruption as well? So we can... sorry.
Yeah. Hello. I would like to ask, in all these indicators that you have given, applicable to the cartels and cases, how does it work, a price set by a budget, but by fiscal law? Because normally public procurers work on a budget, so the price is set by the parliament, not by, well, of the contracts. Also, I would like to ask a bit further on the indicators you have given on a typical case of collusion, two companies that split the market. They apply for 3 lots and the other applies for the other 3. There's freedom of contract. You can enter into the agreement you want. Why would it be something punishable? And also the indicator on discounts, it's something that would go against procurement laws. You cannot take into account in bids discounts, because you will, it introduces the factor of unequal treatment. So yeah, and the last thing to wrap up, all these analyses should be performed at the budget level, at the procurement strategy level, or bid by bid, and yeah. That's it. Oh, sorry. I'm Isabel Sanchez. I work for the European Commission. I'm a competition lawyer by training, and now I do public procurement things.
Thank you for the many interesting questions. So I will tackle 3 or maybe 4, and I leave the difficult ones for Francesco. Okay, so unit prices. Surprisingly, there are some countries. There are some countries which publish this data. So, for example, Peru, where we have done research, has amazing unit prices. So you would know this car, this brand, this number of quantity, and this is the price. Now, this obviously has limits, right? So you cannot easily come up with unit prices for 1 kilometer of highway, because there are so many specifications, differences in terrain, so on and so forth. So it works for some markets and not for others. And also, we have colleagues working on electricity prices in the Czech Republic. And basically what they did, they collected the data from announcements themselves. So even though it's not published often, you can retrospectively gather some of this data. Now, what makes me worried about unit prices is actually when you look at the content of these contracts, it's not just quantity and price, right? For electricity, which you always claim, oh, it's just a homogeneous product, easy, right? Actually, it's not. It's like, you know, how quickly you fix the electricity line, if it goes down, how long is your contract, all sorts of very detailed additional services around the unit of the standard product, which actually influence prices. So even though you think you have a handle, like purge, electricity is usually not an easy market. So there are unit prices. If you are careful with them, you know, like cars, whatever, you can get a handle of it, but it's no easy business, I think. So, but I do think that this is the way we should go, because these winning rebates and relative prices, I mean, very crude measures of corruption, the prices. Unit prices would be a lot more. Then about linking data, and thank you for this question, because I have this thing that we invest so much money in procurement systems for making our own lives more difficult, right? So instead of linking data sets, for example, automatically filling in, you know, company names, company IDs, addresses, we ask people to fill in all this information in the electronic system, and in addition, you know, dig for the other data set and then pulling the link manually, right? So I think this is something which I hope, as Francesco mentioned, with the new directive, with the march of true electronic procurement, in a sense that we don't just put up things on an electronic bulletin, but actually do procurement in terms of submission, invoices, and a lot of things online. So I do hope that this is going to be the direction. But linking data is absolutely crucial for, you know, avoiding error and minimizing a bureaucratic burden. And DGV's data, so yes, we are scraping data. In some cases, when there is a structured API or a table which you can download, we don't lose data, right? But for most cases, we get data. For those of you who are not familiar with the terminology, scraping means that you write an algorithm which cycles through a great number of web pages and extracts text from the HTML code, right? So it's kind of trying to understand the structure of a website and then create a database based on that, right? So we are doing that, and it has an error rate. And the reason why we haven't published the data already months ago, because we are testing the rate of error, right? And unfortunately, the rate of error will be higher in countries like Italy, where I'm pretty sure the code for the website has been written in the 90s, and it was already sloppy at the time. So it's like very hard to reverse engineer the database behind it. But you know, in some countries, Norway or Switzerland, it's very good structured data, so we don't feel that there will be a lot of data lost. But yes, it's not a perfect world, and I would really just urge governments to actually publish their data sets if they have data sets, rather than force us to reverse engineer the data sets behind the websites.
So, no. Regarding the question of the governance that arrived from both of you in different ways. So, personally, I think that the ideal structure, first of all, these tests are used currently by competition authorities in general because they can be applied to any market. So, and this is unrelated to procurement, they are already doing, and they should keep on doing for the reasons discussed today. Now, when we move specifically to procurement, for the reasons that I mentioned at the very end of the presentation, but let me emphasize them again, the best test and the most reliable evidence is produced when there is really an understanding of the market and of the institution, and these are not like generic tests, but they're targeted to the procurement formats, to the way they exchange subcontract, to whether they can form joint ventures ex ante. So this answers your question because it says they must be done by those who handle the data and who understand the institution. That cannot be a DG Comp or an antitrust commission who has already too much to do. It has to be done by the procurement experts. So in Italy, for instance, that would be ANAC. But then it means also that it must be done by somebody who knows how to use the data and has like a passion for collecting high quality data, which is not the case. And then, yeah, the other question in general on the budget and on discounts is related to the answer of the first one. In a sense, everything can be done, but there must be an understanding of the regulations. So these are like our environments, a public procurement that is heavily regulated. You are a lawyer by training. So economists can only contribute once they understand the laws within which these markets are working and functioning. So for instance, in Italy, the firms bid discounts typically, and is on the discounts relative to the initial reserve price that is calculated with certain formulas that you make your analysis. And so is this rebate the important unit of analysis, but you also need to know how the initial formula for constructing the base price was constructed. And that differs between sectors, and also in Italy differs between geographical areas. And so in constructing your benchmark and understanding whether a price is excessively high, excessively low, you need to understand all this. And so once again, this requires a certain understanding of the market. So a black box in which you just push run and will tell you who is colluding or not will certainly not work.
Yes, concerning corruption and collusion, so I think that the collusion is more diverse and more complex phenomenon than corruption, because when we take in consideration the collusion, there is more than two actors in most of the case. That in the term of corruption, in the main model of corruption is only two actors, a corruptee and corruptor, or principal and agent. So I can say that the collusion is a squared version of corruption. But our indicator, as Francesco also mentioned, is useful to detect the collusion, but you have to take consideration other indicators, other very important indicators. For instance, the price, the standard deviation of the price and cost analysis, and so on. Maybe one of the indicator of collusion could be our indicator.
So I want to thank our speakers, and so now we have how long we can. We continue immediately. Okay.
No. I just want to give you two practical information. At 6 we will have a cocktail downstairs in the courtyard. And then for those who reserved, and this was underlined, so I have to say it twice, for those who reserved, At 7:30, the tour will depart. Okay, thank you very much.